big believer that everything that happens in our life is a result of the way that we've been feeling and expressing ourselves. And then if people were really honest with themselves, they would think about that and go, you know what? Yes, because my mindset's been that, I've felt lousy, or I've not been honoring myself, I've not been valuing myself.
Welcome to the Effortless Swimming podcast, the show that helps swimmers and triathletes love the water, become a better swimmer, and live a better life. Here's your host, Brenton Ford.
Welcome to the Effortless Swimming podcast. This is episode number 185, and my guest is two-time Commonwealth Game and Olympian, Julie McDonald. So, Julie, welcome.
Thank you so much.
So we were just talking about the trials going on at the moment. There's a lot of really exciting swimming happening. And my guess is you've been watching it pretty closely with your background in competitive swimming. And what have you noticed in the last week or so that they've been competing? What stood out to you?
It's really interesting, I guess, Brenton. For me, the exciting bit is that a lot of the people that I swam with have got kids that are swimming at the trials, which kind of makes you feel old. But it's exciting to see, their careers taking off and how they're responding to it. The biggest thing with the Olympics, it doesn't matter, who you are. It's everyone in the back of their mind has that this is a once every 4-year event. And obviously with what happened last year, it's once every 5 years, but that added more pressure for some. So those athletes that were looking at retiring, I think they could have looked at it two ways. They could have looked at it that they've got another 12 months. They've got another 12 months to get work behind them. And, obviously it was difficult for some, that Victorians, obviously the majority, but they could look at it that gave them more opportunity to get better, or that they went into that mental mindset of, I was about to give up. And, the initial shoulders drop, and then it's like, can I do another 12 months? And so it's interesting to see these athletes that are winning now and seeing that, some of them have had, an injury last year, so they had a bit of time off, and so they're a bit fresher, so they've come back better than ever. You see other athletes that were younger that got that extra 12 months and used it to their best advantage and went, right, I've got another 12 months trained for these Olympics, let's go. So for me, it's been interesting to see who has been excelling and who hasn't been.
Yeah, it's you look at someone like Kyle Chalmers, who he had his shoulder op 6 months ago. And so for him, it's worked well. And I think they were saying Cam McAvoy as well. He sort of looked at it and went, I might get in and train for, have a comeback and just get in the gym more and bulk up. And he's made the 4x1 team. So it's worked very well for some swimmers. And the times that they're doing, so impressive. So I remember thinking last year about time out of the water with the lockdown and everything, how will this actually affect people? And hasn't really. It's probably done wonders for them by the look of it.
I think it has. You look at how many world records have been broken or so close to world records, and it's been exciting, and I think that doesn't matter, what went on last year, every Olympic trials is, there's always going to be those triumphs. There's always going to be those narrow misses, and, the way we were trained was that you either came first or second under that qualifying time, or it didn't matter. And I noticed a post on Facebook today of a guy who used to be a journo who's now an athletics coach, and he posted up about somebody that just missed out, and I just said that happens with so many. You've got to be prepared that it's 1-2 on the wall under the qualifying time, guaranteed to go.
And that's why it's exciting. It's you could miss out by 0.01 of a second. And I think it was the turn of breaststroke. I can't remember the swimmer's name, but he came in second. Yes. And the look on his face. The poor guy you felt for him. Yeah.
It's and I feel for him because his grandma passed away last year, right? And I feel for that because that was me in 1990 Commonwealth Games. Before you were born, right?
Sorry. Come on, give me some.
Okay, right, yeah, okay.
I've got some wrinkles here.
So my granddad, my biggest fan, passed away a few months before the Commonwealth Games, and I know what that's like. It's in the back of your mind, and you want to do the best for them, and so I felt for him for that. But you look at his times, and the last couple of years, he's sort of been getting a bit slower. He hasn't hit those times that he did at the World Champs and in 2017, and you sort of think, well, so for me, I was sort of, I guess I think the selectors, they're either thinking we've only got so many spots on the team. Obviously, if everybody qualifies automatically, that leaves less spots for those who are borderline. They're not known for their leniency. They're not known for their generosity, these selectors, or compassion. So they've got a job to do. And the athletes have got to make it easier for themselves by just knowing they're going to do that time, and being prepared. And, everyone's going to have their good and bad days. But, I did feel for him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard not to feel for him. But look, it's that's what it's all about. And I mean, so Laurie Lawrence being your coach, I mean, I imagine you've got that mindset of, it's all about the stuff to silver, it's all about the gold. Is that something that you feel like you had in the early days of your swimming, or is that something that you had to take on board with the coaching of Laurie and just having that repeated, and you eventually embodied that sort of mindset?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to chat with my mum and see if I was really competitive when I first, was younger. Some of my memories of my brother and sister riding our bikes around the house, I've got a feeling that, I pretty much wanted to win. And I think swimming, I just found the sport that was good for me. When I was younger, I wanted to be a jockey, because we lived on acreage and we had horses in the backyard. And when I was 10, my dad, said, "Sweetheart, you're too big to be a jockey." I cried for 2 days, and then they said, "You can swim." Oh, okay. So for me, that was, I think, bred into us. From a very early age. I learnt to swim with Laurie. I really only had a year or two away from him because of the transition from a 50-meter pool outdoor to when Chandler was being built. And I think that we had that culture in our squad that you did whatever it took to win, and that we were going to do extra, and that, we didn't want to leave any stone unturned. And I remember training for Barcelona. We were training down at Palm Beach Currumbin Pool outdoors, and it was 12 months to the Olympics. And Laurie said, "We're training at midnight because we'll be the first athletes training with 12 months to go." So we rocked up at the pool at midnight and did 2 hours training, and then went home, went back to bed. He would do crazy stuff like that, and but it made it fun, that we worked hard, but we also really tried to enjoy ourselves by doing it, and pushing each other. And so I think that culture was definitely bred into us. We always had that goal in mind of the Olympic gold. It's what everybody that, has some kind of competitive nature in them, it goes for. And, I think that when you get there, when you make that Olympic team the first time, I think there's a bit of relief. And then there's that, right, now our job starts again. And that's, we were talking before about the Olympic trials being so close to the Olympics. And I was saying that may not have worked for me because the way that we trained, and maybe we would have had to change the way we trained, but when we trained, we trained for nationals in February. That was when we made the teams, and then we got back in and we started that preparation again for the Olympics or Commonwealth Games, and we had 5 or 6 months to do that again. So it was sort of, you're preparing for 2 meets a year. So I think it would have been interesting to see how we went. I know that sometimes it works for athletes, sometimes it doesn't. It didn't work that well for Janet Evans in 1987 for the Pan Pacs. She broke the world record 2 weeks before Pan Pacs, came to Australia, and then had the Pan Pacific Championships 2 weeks later, and swam 10 seconds slower than her world record, which was great for me because I won the race. But it would have been good, if we had have been head to head, because, I missed her world record by 0.7 of a second. So, it's interesting to see. I think it suits some athletes and not others.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, for you in that first Olympics, how old were you in the first Olympics? You weren't. You're quite young,
18.
weren't you?
18.
18. There you go. Were you nervous going in? Did you feel like you were quite young and perhaps inexperienced then, or where was your head at going into that first one?
I think Laurie really trained our mindset to be ready. And I'd had a tummy bug leading into the Olympics where my training was affected a bit. And I just remember, like, we all gathered at the Commonwealth, at the Canberra Institute of Sport for a farewell dinner. And I remember getting up at about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning with vomiting and diarrhea. And one of my teammates heard me and called the doctor, and they had to give me an injection to stop me vomiting. And I remember the next morning we all got up and got in our outfits ready to get on the plane to go to Seoul. And I was like Moses. I parted the sea of people. The word had got around, really sick. And it was, I've got photos of when I rock up at Seoul Airport and I am just white. I'm white as a ghost. And thank goodness we didn't have social media back then, because if I'd have been taking selfies of myself, I'd have been going, gee, I look like rubbish,
Yeah.
Totally. But it was interesting. I don't think I was nervous, but I remember walking in the gates of the Olympic Village beside Grant Kenny, actually. And I remember feeling that instant relief that we're here and we've made it, and I think my tummy bug was probably pressure, right? Pressure that I was putting on myself because of the expectations that we had that go along with being involved with Laurie's squad, was that we're there to win. And, and as an 18-year-old, it's a bit daunting, going to the Olympic Games. But it was just, I think that moment walking in those gates, it was, I'm here, and the relief. And then I felt like the pressure was a bit off then. And then I had 6 days to prepare before, lining up behind blocks.
And you had quite a few squad mates there, didn't you, in that first Olympics that made the team?
Yeah, we did 4 or 5.
Yeah, and that I imagine that would have helped as well, like feeling you're in similar or familiar surroundings a little bit with familiar people, and having Laurie there as well. It must have been and I think what we're seeing now at the moment too, seeing Dean Boxall with that sort of very similar personality to Laurie. It's just it feels as though that kind of personality just instills some kind of some kind of positivity, and we can do this. You were seeing that play out at the moment. Is that sort of what you felt, and instilling that kind of mindset that you mentioned? Is that something, was that from a combination of hard work and the words and the way he would say it? Like what sort of made all of that come together?
Yeah, funny you say that. I was, watching the couple of the races the other day, and, when Dean was going off, and I went, oh my goodness, here's our next Laurie. Like, it was just the same, whipping, along the side of the pool. And I was like, oh yeah, that's funny. I guess, yeah, it's a combination of, we'd done the work. We were doing 80 to 100 Ks a week. Well, I was for my event, 80 to 100 Ks a week, as well as land work. The mindset, Laurie would always play games with us mentally. He would, instill that belief and gear us up. He would pretend that he was on the phone to Janet Evans as coach, and he would, he goes, Julie, I'm talking to Janet Evans as coach, and she's doing, 2800s, and then I'd go, bullshit, Laurie, but it was fun, and so that when we get to the Olympics, we all know we're there for a job, and we all know what job we've got to do. And it's about, and I was just thinking about it the other day, I remember we did a lot of walking before we went to Seoul, because Laurie knew that there was going to be, that was going to be the only way we're going to get from the village to the pool was walking distance. So, you know, walking a couple of Ks a day. So let's get familiar with that. So there was a lot of preparation with things like that. He would do a lot of research around that. And I remember when we got to the Olympic Village, a couple of the athletes went into into Itaewon, and one of the boys bought me a bike, right? And a $5 bike, and that I could ride. And I was like, wow, that's really awesome. Thanks so much. So I was able to ride from and I don't remember having the conversation with him. He may be able to shed some light on it, but you know, I was able to ride from the village to the pool, and it was a lot easier than it was walking all the time. And so, but you know, you're there for that, and it's all about getting your head into the right space then, and being prepared, and not getting caught up with you know, we weren't allowed to go out of the village until after our swim. That was our thing with Laurie. We were stuck in the village, and we just had to, we weren't, you know, no excessive walking, walk to the food hall, walk to the pool. That's all we were allowed to do, you know, and just conserve our energy for what we had to do. Because as I said before, it's once every 4 years. You know, I know there's athletes that I swam with that, you know, could have been possibly more talented than what I was, but once they made the team, they gave up. You know, they just sort of relaxed, and they're like, oh, I'm on the Olympic team now. You know, and it was just, and that we didn't understand that mindset. Our mindset was we're there to do a job, to get the medals and come home. But yeah, it is easier when you got your coach there. It's easier when you got your teammates there, because you've got that familiarity.
I was just thinking back I haven't been to MSAC for a while, the main pool in Melbourne, but I remember it was a couple of years ago, I walked into the indoor pool after not being there for like 5 years. And I had this flashback of going there for, like, you know, state championships was always there. And I had this flood of just like nerves come into my body, of just, you know, as a teenager growing up, and, you know, you go to the pool each day of states, and you have the finals, and those nerves that you'd have as a kid. Do you have those sort of similar flashbacks or feelings when you see this stuff, or when you like go to certain pools that have memories for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And even when I'm doing a keynote presentation, and if they play some of my footage, you know, like I get nervous, you know, like when I'm about to like watching my race, I'm like, I know the outcome, but I'm still nervous. Yeah. And even that last 50, you know, and it's excitement, you know, I think it's nerves, excitement. It's a little bit of, you know, if you watch the Pan Pac race, it's a bit of like, why couldn't I get 0.7 more, you know, or the Olympic race when Anki Mooring and I were charging to the wall for the bronze, you know, it's that, you know, I get that stirred up grit and like, come on, and I'm pushing myself, you know, and, but I love that, you know, and you know, the old Adelaide pool, where I made my first Australian team, before they renovated it, the scoreboard used to be on the side of the pool. So I remember, you know, turning at the 800 meter mark, because the way I made my first Australian team was I actually entered the meet as a backstroker, and I came out as a distance freestyler. We had entered the 1500 freestyle as a backup in case I didn't make it in the backstroke events. I made it in the 100 back, but not the 200. And so the 1500 was my last effort. So we'd spoken to the selectors and said, will you please consider me if I go faster than the girl who won the 800 free? And they had agreed. And so when I turned at the 800 meter mark, I pushed off the wall. As soon as I took a breath, I could see my time up on the scoreboard. So I knew I'd beaten my teammate, Jenny, who won the 800 free. And so I'm like, Laurie, we've made it. Like, so I'm swimming, right? You're like, Laurie, mum and dad, Laurie, mum and dad. And then like he let me muck around like that for a lap, for 100. And then he went, get going, you know? So it was interesting because I'm not sure who it was that said it, but who was it that won the 200 medley? But she said in the breaststroke leg, she could see her time. Yeah. She could see a split, and she knew she was 50 freestyle to go, what she sort of had to do. So, you know, yeah, I remember those types of things. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I imagine that feeling would never, you'd never forget that. And what would you consider to be your best swim?
I think my best swim was Pan Packs, because I just felt so good. I felt so good in the warm up. Normally I do 2K warm up, and I did 400 meters. And even after 100, I said to Laurie, I'm ready. And he goes, no, you need to do more. And I just, that once in a lifetime, it was a once in a lifetime for me. It was just everything aligned on that day, and I felt amazing. And I just, for the first time, went out hard from the start and left Janet for dead. Whereas with the Olympics, I dived in, I felt rubbish, and, and I had to fight for it, so I think if I had to race again, I would like to race like Pan Packs.
Yeah.
But I think, you can't go past the Olympics. Racing in Olympic Games is pretty special.
And how, so you said it felt good from the start for the Pan Packs swim. And what about at the end? Did you feel like you're exhausted, or you just felt like you felt pretty good and almost like you could keep going? Because I find that often with like the best, sometimes your best races are the ones that you just, it doesn't really hurt as much as those ones where you have to grind it out.
I know, right? And because I never really created a lot of lactic acid, I didn't get fatigued. I always negative split my races. So for me, my downfall was sprinting. So I didn't ever go out really fast, and for the Olympics in 88, I went out in 4:14 and came home in 4:07, and I just, the longer I went, the better I got. So for me, yeah, I don't think I ever felt fatigued. Once I hit that wall, it was like, oh, I'm done, your beauty or whatever. And I think I always tell people that the moment you touch that wall, the pain goes away instantly, and
yeah.
But yeah, I was lucky. I was one of those athletes that never really created lactic acid, so it wasn't ever a drama.
Yeah, look, one benefit to being a distance swimmer. Yeah, and with your second Olympics, so going into that, so the story, I'll let you tell the story there about why you didn't perform how you wanted to, but how were you leading into that? Did you feel like you were training well and your times were great, and that you're a real shot at
yes,
a gold medal?
So the trials, I was 22, which was considered old for an athlete back then. I went in, won the 400, the 800. I felt great. I swam well. My times were, I think, equal number one in the world with Janet Evans at the time. And I knew I could go in there and win. I knew I could win. I'd beaten her before. I was the only non-drugged athlete to beat her ever in her career. So I knew I could do it. And I remember just being at the Olympics and just not feeling excited. I didn't get nervous before my race. I just felt flat. And then when I swam the 400 and did no good, people were like, don't worry, your 800, your gig, and you'll be right for the 800, in a couple of days. And then when I dived in for the 800 free, I had nothing. And like those visions, I could see Laurie and, oh, damn it. I could see Laurie on one side. He's just looking at me, like I could just see him looking just bewildered. And I could see my parents in the grandstand just sitting there bewildered. And while you're racing, you're doing your best, but when you've got nothing in the tank and your mind kind of takes over, and you have these thoughts, and you're like, what's going on, and so when I touched the wall, I knew I hadn't made the final, and I swam so slow, and within 3 days I'd left the Olympic Village. I didn't want my disappointment to affect the others, and allow them to celebrate. And then when I got home, my doctor said, "You need to come and see me." Sorry.
It's okay.
And we did some tests, and I had septicemia, which is blood poisoning, which I'd got from an infected wisdom tooth about 3 or 4 months before. And we'd made the decision that we wouldn't remove the tooth because I'd have to have 2 weeks out of the water, and that the antibiotics that the dentist gave me would kill the infection. But what they didn't say was that the bacteria from the infected wisdom tooth would poison my system, and that's what happened. So, you know, it's just one of those things that sometimes it brings up emotion. And I think being Olympic week, you know, being the trials and seeing some of the kids going through the same thing, I understand it, and it's destroying, you know. It's took me a long time to get over that.
Yeah, and I watching some of the guys who have missed out and who were perhaps expecting to make a team, or even like it was considered they were going to be on the team. It's so hard to watch them go through that and think like, I was thinking, what do you say to them? Like, there's nothing you can say to make them feel better. What did your parents, what did Laurie say afterwards?
Yeah, like there's a photo of Laurie and I, and I'm just sitting there like this, and he's holding my wrists, and I think he just, you know, I don't remember what was said. You know, I'm pretty sure that there's not a lot to say, and I think Laurie probably did his best to try and sort of console me or work out what was wrong. And, you know, for my parents, you know, they were just like, "You did your best, and on the day I did, it's all I could do, you know." And like looking at me, you wouldn't have known that I was sick. You know, I looked great. I was ready, you know, mentally ready, physically ready, but you just don't know what's going on in your body that you can't see, right? And I've had a few incidences like that in my life where I've had, you know, in my 20s, I had 3 major health issues. I had septicemia in Barcelona. I had chlorine poisoning when I made a comeback in 95, and then had stage 2 melanoma when I was 27.
Wow. And so after the Olympics, how was there something that looking back in the end, was there positives to take from it?
Oh yeah, like I think go with your gut feel, you know, like with things like that, you know, with your health, you know, I sort of, you know, and I think hindsight's always a great thing, right? You always say, "Oh, I should have got the tooth out," but it's just listening to your body. And I was usually pretty good at that, you know, like if I would take my heart rate every morning, and if my heart rate was above, you know, 62 beats a minute, I knew that I was getting some kind of infection or cold or something. And so that, you know, then I'd monitor it all in my logbooks and, you know, be like, "Laurie, my heart rate was up this morning," and, you know, just monitoring stuff like that. And, but yeah, it's some of those things are just unknown, you know, and you can, some things you can't prepare for, but it is what it is. And then it's just doing the best you can with what happens on the day.
Yeah, that's it. And I know, like you've using logbooks as you're doing that throughout your career. I remember using them as a teenager as well. I don't know too many athletes that are using them these days, whether they've got them using them on the phone or not. But have you still got those logbooks throughout your swimming career? And how often do you look back at those? And what do you take from reading back at some of those sessions, and maybe some of your thoughts, like a Dear Diary type of thing that you may have written at times?
Oh yeah, some of them in there, like, you know, some of the fun ones are like, you know, when you're 14 and the LA Olympics are on, and you've got John Sieben, Justin Lemberg, Michael Delaney, you know, the original Mean Machine then, and they became advertisers for a bread company, and they put out these stickers, and here these boys in their swimmers, and there's none of the suits that they got today where it covers them all up. We got DTs that are like covering nothing, we're like, they're stuck all through my logbook. But yeah, it's funny because I've still got them, and I have shared them with anyone that has wanted to look at them. Anyone that's a distance athlete that wanted to see what kind of work we were doing. And it's fun looking back on them though, and just seeing, because I would write in there, if we went on a training camp or things like that, or like we went to Perth, and it says, I met Fat Cat today, and it was when Carl Wilson and I had gone on Fat Cat, and it's fun. It's good. Probably only look at them, maybe only if I'm doing an interview like this or something, or they've asked me to look at it, but yeah, good fun to look back on.
Is there let's say a week of training that you can remember being the hardest week of training in your life? Is there anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think when we went to Hawaii in 91, I had a few months off training. I just got back in the water to prepare for Barcelona, and Laurie, myself, and a few others got called up for what was it? The America, Canada, and Australia, the distance training camp or something like that, and in Hawaii, right? So Laurie says we can go, and we had been doing 3 and 4K leading in to this to this training camp, but who was going to miss out on a training camp in Hawaii? And so we get there, and our shortest session was 10K, and the majority of sessions were 14K. And what it was basically was an ego fest of all the coaches, because each coach got to do a different session, and so they wanted to outdo every other coach, and Mr. Carew was on the team, and he was the guy that gave us the 10K session because he felt bad for us. He was like, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to give you 10K. It was crazy. That was the hardest week ever, I think.
Oh, how many Ks do you think you did in that week?
Oh, well, we did, I think I should look back on the logbook. I think we would have only been there for 6 days, I would say. We probably did at least, 80K, 80 to 90K, or maybe it must have been more, 90Ks for the week, or, it was pretty full on, but I mean, I think it was just because it was like everyone was trying to do the hard session each time. There was no recovery. Whereas with my training, we would often do 80 to 100Ks a week anyway, but it would be, a combination of, heart rate sessions or distance or, whatever.
It's funny, isn't it? And I think probably from the coach's perspective too, it's probably a bit of an ego to see who can write the hardest session. So it's a bit of a pissing contest with that. But I think, and it would also be, I think, having some like the top distance swimmers in the world, a majority of them there. How much fun would that be as a coach on the deck, just watching these guys train like that? I remember watching Mac Horton and Greg Paltrinieri train at MSAC, just watching those two guys go back and forth. You're just like, wow, this is awesome to watch. So having several of you there would have been a pretty awesome experience. So I can see why it became a bit of an ego trip for many of them to write the hardest session. But I wouldn't like to be on the receiving end of it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think we went out to an excursion 1 or 2 days. We went to the beach once, and we went on the Polynesian village another day, and I think that was our only reprieve, but it was not a lot of entertainment, I can tell you. There was a lot of sleeping going on in between sessions.
Did you get to stay after the camp, or was it or you didn't get to enjoy the sights or anything like that? It was just warm weather and that was all?
Come back, head back, and then prepare for Barcelona. It was sort of like, it was definitely a shock to the system, but it was like, oh well, since we've done that, can't be too hard now.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, wow. And what about towards the end of your swimming career? What was that transition for you from swimmer to working and having to put that behind you in a way?
Well, I did it twice. So after Barcelona was interesting, and this is a great reflection on mindset. So come home from Barcelona, destroyed. I'm pretty disillusioned. I went on a holiday with my partner at the time, came back, and Stuart Home, one of the colleges here in Brisbane, was looking for a swim coach. So I went and did that for 6 months to sort of work out what I wanted to do. And every time that I went to a function or got invited to a lunch or something, I would collect business cards, right? And I would get these business cards and I would write on them where I met this person, and then I would file them into a folder. And when I came back, when I was ready to, after coaching with all the girls, I thought, well, I've got to get a real job. So I got out my folder and I started calling these people and saying, hi, it's Julie McDonald. We met at whatever conference, blah, 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 or event, la, la, la. I'm looking for a job, wondering if you've got any jobs going, and they would go, have you got a degree? Have you got this kind of training, and no, sorry, no, I can't help you. I got to M.
And running out of letters.
Yeah, it's a lot of letters. And I only saw it the other day. Anyway, and there's lots of cards in there. And I got to M, and they said, well, if you can start tomorrow, we've got a training course starting. So I was like, okay. So it was pretty soul destroying, because I just didn't know what else I was going to do. And then when I made a comeback in 95 and tried out for Atlanta, I got third at the trials. Obviously, hadn't given myself enough time to train, but originally I only got back in the water to train for Masters because that was in Hawaii. I was trying to get that holiday in Hawaii.
Yeah, I reckon.
2 months in, I went, stuff Masters, I'm going to the Olympics. So I went and changed coaches, went to Mr. Carew and said, will you train me? And he said, you've got 10 months. And I said, will you train me? And so anyway, he said yes. So when I finished trials, even though I got third, I felt really satisfied. And I thought, you know what, I can do anything if I really commit my mind to it. And I felt really good about it. And so then when I got back to Brisbane, I got job offers. I had people saying, hey, I hear you've retired, can you come and do work for us? And then, I started in my first job, and then, a couple of months, pretty much, like a year in, then I'd be somewhere and someone go, what are you doing? I'd tell them what I was doing. They're going, have you ever thought about doing this? No. Why don't we have a chat? So then I just kept being poached, and I went from one job to the other being headhunted, and it was such a different experience, and I just sort of look back on that and I go, it was totally mindset, the energy that I was putting out there. I came back from Barcelona shattered, feeling that I had let so many people down, that I was a disappointment. Whereas then I came back from Atlanta trials feeling like, hey, this is possible and anything's possible. So that was a massive difference for me. And, in that time after Barcelona, I stayed away from the Olympics. I didn't, I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't, I just did my job that I was in, and I put on a lot of weight. I was pretty, probably just wasn't living my best life. And then it was interesting after 96 how different that was.
Yeah, I think for me, I think had a similar experience in terms of like the mindset that you've got. Like at times, let's say like last year, at times when when things shut down, it was tough. It felt like are we ever going to get out of this? And it felt like there's no, like, I don't know where the business is going to go. And I just sort of shut down any possibilities of growing or changing what we were doing. And then when things started to open up, and, in this positive frame of mind where, anything's possible, opportunities start to come, and then you sort of take those actions and you have some success, and it just really starts to grow. And it is so much to do with mindset. And so is there anything that like over the last, since 95, have you come across times where you've noticed you may have been in a bit more of a negative headspace, and you've been able to turn it around and draw on that experience?
Yeah, so many times, right? So unfortunately, I got myself involved in a couple of unhealthy relationships, and from that, I think it was pretty much an overall feeling of a low self-worth and self-esteem. And people that know me might think that that's really odd, and they don't understand that. But that experience with Barcelona still would affect me from time to time. And particularly every time an Olympic came up or Commonwealth Games come up, it would become, it would always remind me of that. And any time that I wasn't doing well in my job, then, those thoughts of, oh, I'm not good enough, or I can't do it, or things like that. And so positive mindset is a daily activity that you have to control, and you have to really practice. And so then after I left my second unhealthy relationship was when I really started pouring myself into personal development, and understanding the person I was, and why I had attracted that to me. And people, I'm a big believer that everything that happens in our life is a result of the way that we've been feeling and expressing ourselves. And then if people were really honest with themselves, they would think about that and go, you know what? Yes, because my mindset's been that, I've felt lousy, or I've not been honoring myself, I've not been valuing myself. So then I've had a car accident, or I've had, run into something or somebody that, has been unhealthy. So, it's about taking control of our thoughts, and really changing the way that we think, and valuing ourselves and honoring ourselves, and then being able to attract all the really good things. Like you said, looking for opportunities, and being open to what is going to come in, who can I help today? For me every day, who can I help today? Who can I serve today? And whose life can I change? But also that I am enough, and that I am valued, and I've got a lot, good things that I can give to the world. So it's important to, it's interesting when we're kids, and particularly girls, any girl that had great self-esteem and great self-worth and was confident would normally be portrayed as a bitch. And then she would be picked on, or then she would be victimized in some way, and whereas what we should have done was be going, how can I be like her? How can I improve myself and have that confidence and self-esteem and self-worth like her? And so now, sorry, my dog's having a coughing fit. So now it's just about teaching people that, so that then they can have the best life that they want, because I know that works, and I look back on my swimming career and I go, so what were my thoughts leading into Barcelona? Was it pressure? Was it, was it something that was in my subconscious that caused, me to have an infected wisdom tooth, and, things like that? It's just, I'm always looking at, okay, how can I always do something better? So, it is massive. Mindset is huge, but it's something that it's like a muscle that needs to be exercised every day. Because I've noticed that last year, when we really focused on a particular mindset and everything, our business grew. Whereas this year I'd noticed that, I've kind of just been riding that wave, and I've not really been focusing, having that intention. And it's still growing a little bit, but it's not growing like it did last year. So, it's time to tap back into that.
And with the speaking that you're doing, is that, when did you start doing that? Was it long after 95? Was it while you're working full time, or how did that come about? And when did you start it?
Well, from when I made my first Commonwealth Games team, I would be asked to go to schools and do school presentations or award ceremonies. Stand up on stage and say something, and invited to events and things like that. Not necessarily always speaking, but maybe being interviewed a lot. And so then it was a steady flow, and then getting, I think in 99, 99, I started my own speaking business, really started doing it professionally, rode that wave. Oh yeah, it would have been 98, 99 before Sydney, really rode that wave of, that was incredible 18 months, traveling Australia speaking. And then I had my son a couple of years later. So then I went back to coaching, and put speaking on hold for a bit until he was about 4 or 5, and then started again. So, I love doing my inspirational speaking, but I kind of am now moving more towards being a personal development coach and helping people with that mindset and how can they become self-motivators. And so they're not relying on, there's not really a lot of events that they can go to and listen to an inspirational speaker. So how are they, motivating themselves? How are they able to get through, situations like Victoria's gone through in the last 12 months? And it's just training them to have that mindset and that capability to be responsible for themselves and be resilient.
I think it's like I look back at when I was like late teens. I was sort of started reading personal development books and continued that all the way through. And then I found some like journals from a couple of years ago, and I'd often write down things and like what I'd like to achieve, and often they took 2 or 3 times longer than expected. But I think back to the thoughts that I had as a late teen, early 20-year-old, and the things I wanted to do when I grew up and that sort of thing. And pretty much all have sort of come true. And I think it's that consistent thinking about your goals and developing as a person, developing your skills. And and it all starts to come together. And I don't think it doesn't show straight away. It really takes time, but it does happen with that consistent sort of work. And nothing's ever perfect, and you're not going to do things right all the time. But it's that awareness of when that doesn't happen and making the change. And I think for me, taking full responsibility for the things that happen, whether or not you've got any control over it, really or not. I think what's your other option? Just to be a victim? It's I think taking that responsibility, that's been a big one for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot of people. I think with sport, it's a little bit different with your goals because you do have a timeline. You've got a deadline of when you've got to perform, but you can work back from that. But with people that follow the SMART goals, right? You've heard of SMART goals before?
Yeah.
So I smash that out of the water. I go, don't follow that process. If you're an athlete, obviously you've got a deadline. You've got to compete on the 16th of June, 2021. You've got to be ready. But with everybody else, with their goals, I say, write them down, work on them, but don't put a timeline on them. Because as you just said, sometimes they take longer, right? So if you say that you've got a goal of you want to achieve a certain amount of income by the 31st of December 2021, right? And you're doing the process, you're doing the activity that needs to develop that business, and then it comes to the 1st of December, and you might be a fair way off that, right? And so then what happens? The doubt starts coming in, and you go, and then you say to yourself, I don't think I'm going to make it because I've only got 31 days to go and I'm nowhere near it. Now, you could have won lotto the next day and achieved that goal, but you energetically have put it out there, I'm not going to achieve it, right? So that's where SMART goals fall down because they're the timeline. You start that doubt. The moment you have an ounce of doubt, you've blown it, and so that's what I teach people is that don't worry about the how, don't worry about the when, just focus on what you really want. Because so many times I've heard stories of, I've done vision board workshops with people, and then they've pulled out the vision boards, 2 or 3 years later, and they look at it and they're going, "You got to be kidding me. This is what's happened," So it's just about embedding that into your mind and believing that it's going to happen. With sport, it is a little bit different, but the majority of people I'm working with aren't sports people.
Yeah. It's 'cause what I found in the past when I was setting goals that were very much to a deadline, it'd be time and time again, it'd be like, "Oh, it hasn't happened yet." And then I'd set another date, hasn't happened yet. And it's like, oh man. So I just got fed up with it. And one thing that I looked back at recently, I think I set this, it's probably about 6 years ago, but there was a list of about 10 things that I wrote down. I printed it off and I put it in this little folder, and I just kept it in my desk drawer. And some of those things, it's like, okay, I want to earn the X amount. I want to be able to surf when the surf is good. I want to be able to swim, with a squad when I choose to, and I want to be able to basically do what I like with my time and spend it how I'd like to. And the majority of these things I've ticked off, but it's taken 6 years since setting them, and that wasn't the first thought I had of these goals. It really took some time, but when you look back at it, you go, "Oh my God, this stuff has happened." And it is such it's just such a good feeling. So you look at that, all right, 5-10 years time, what can happen in that time frame?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And don't limit yourself. I think a lot of people set goals that they think that they're going to achieve, and SMART goals, they say, relevant, achievable goals. No, because if the goal doesn't scare you, if it doesn't get you excited, then it's not a goal worth having. Olympic gold, that gets people excited, that gets people motivated. If you went in there and go, your goal was to make, for me, with considering my background and what, the culture we were in, if I had have went to Laurie and go, "I want to make the Olympic team," he would have probably smacked me in the head. And it's like, no, that's not good enough, and so it's you got to set out there goals that you think that may never happen, and don't worry about how it's going to happen, but really focus on what that is, what you want.
One of the ones that just came to mind was it's probably 5 or 6 years ago when we were starting to run our swimming clinics, and we just started, and we were running maybe one every 2 months, or like a day's worth every 2 months. And then I was like sort of mapping it out. And I think the number that I wrote was like, I'd love to have 700 people a year do our clinics. And I looked at that and thought, "Whoa, that's impossible. There's no way, I can't see that's going to happen." But anyway, I wrote it down, and that sort of worked with the numbers. And then for the last couple of years, we've had like double that every year go through clinics. And it's like, geez, and now it just feels it's normal, and you get accustomed to it. And you just sort of learn how to deliver that and do a good job of it. So this stuff that at the time might feel unachievable, you might look back and go, "Oh, you're well beyond it," and you can't see not doing that now. So I think back to when I was sort of early 20s. It's like, the stuff that you think is scary and challenging, you'll probably be doing that in 5 or 10 years and well beyond it. So just be used to something that might be very different down the track from where you are.
Yeah, that's it. No, exactly right. I mean, you look at careers now, the careers that are happening now weren't around 15, 20 years ago. My son's doing game programming. He's had that dream since he was 8 years old. There were no courses around when he was 8 years old, no university courses. But now he's at uni with a uni that's designed especially for that. So, don't ever limit yourself because it's not there yet.
Well, thinking of when you got initially, when you were asking, have you got a degree? Have you got this sort of training? These days, it feels very different. Certainly degrees can help with some roles, but I think as a business owner, no one, they just want the job done well. And what degree you've got is irrelevant if it's not in, say, a STEM field or something like that. So it is a very different world. And I think, for me as someone who employs people, it's like, I don't care about that stuff. If you can do the job and do it well, or you can learn to do it, then that's all I care about. It's very different than what it was 20 odd years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And for people who are listening to this, what's the best way to get in contact with you? Where can they find you on social media or on your website? What are those details?
Yeah, so I've got Facebook is Julie McDonald OAM, because there's 5 billion Julie McDonald, so it's easy to find me. Julie McDonald OAM. Same with my Instagram, and my website is the same, juliemcdonaldoam.com.
Fantastic. And we'll put that on the website as well. So, Julie, I really appreciate it's been quite a long call. So we've gone probably a little bit over time, but that was great. I appreciate you sharing those stories and being willing to sort of go back and travel back to what it was like for some of those events. So, yeah, that's right. Well, I really appreciate it. So, Julie, it's been fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great fun.
Thanks for listening to the Effortless Swimming Podcast. If you'd like us to help you become a faster, more efficient swimmer, go to www.effortlessswimming.com.